The triple evacuation method is usually spoken of in classes as being the correct way to evacuate a system. But I'd like to point out that most manufacturers, when they put a triple evacuation method chart in their installation guides, they also state this: the triple evacuation method should be used when vacuum pump is not capable of pumping down to 500 microns and the system does not contain any liquid water. So the triple evacuation method is only to be used if you don't have a vacuum pump that is capable of pumping down to 500 microns for the deep evacuation method. The deep vacuum method requires a vacuum pump capable of pulling a vacuum of 500 microns and a vacuum gauge capable of accurately measuring this vacuum depth. The deep vacuum method is the most positive way of assuring a system is free of air and liquid water. Once pulled to 500 microns, if the vacuum does not rise above 1,000 microns, then the system is tight and dry. If it rises above that, heading towards 2,000 microns, you have some more evacuation work to do. If the vacuum continues to rise, then you possibly have a leak in the system and need to do some leak detection. As we said, the triple evacuation method should be used if you do not have a vacuum pump that is capable of pulling to a 500 micron vacuum. Most modern vacuum pumps are capable of pulling 500 microns of vacuum. Vacuum pumps are generally sized by taking the square root of the tonnage you are evacuating. You guys thought I was nuts for training on square root for the NATE certification test, but here is a practical application of square root that can be used in HVAC work. Therefore, the square root of 5 is generally 2.3, and so for a 5-ton system, we would use at least a 3 CFM vacuum pump. So here we see the application of these things that we've been talking about. We have a correctly sized vacuum pump. This is an 8 CFM, which is more than adequate to pull the system down to 500 microns. We have fat, short hoses that will cut the evacuation time down to a very small amount of time. We have a core removal tool that has taken the Schrader core out of the service valve. And we have a micron gauge that is able of recording down to 500 microns. This may seem to be a real simple question, but when you're using a manifold gauge set to evacuate, which you really shouldn't use, when evacuating, the valves on your manifold gauge set should be open or closed. I ask this because I've been on a number of job sites where some technicians seem to be confused as to how the valves of a manifold gauge set operate. So make sure that you have everything set correctly so that you are pulling a good vacuum on your system. And by the way, the valve should be open. So most of you guys that have followed my videos or come to my classes have seen this slide many times. And I always state that the guy on the left, short and overweight, is good, and the guy on the right that's tall and skinny is bad. This is because the long, skinny hoses that come with most manifold gauge sets are not good for evacuation. However, the short and larger hoses that come with evacuation kits are good. So many of you have seen this chart many times, but we can't emphasize this enough, that when you're trying to pull 500 microns and using a 6-foot 1/4-inch hose, it's going to take 47 minutes to pull a 500 micron evacuation. However, if you use a 6-foot 1/2-inch hose, it's going to take 6 minutes. Core removal tools are absolutely necessary to achieve a quick and efficient evacuation. Again, many of you have seen this slide before, but it needs to be emphasized that when you have a Schrader core in place, you have poor flow through the copper tubing. With the Schrader core removed by a core removal tool, you have good flow and you will decrease your time for evacuation. Dry nitrogen is a blotter gas, which means it will absorb moisture in a system. The triple evacuation process tells you to let the system stand with nitrogen in it for a period of time and to break the vacuum with nitrogen. In the deep vacuum method, it is also a good idea to break the vacuum with nitrogen. By doing this, you are assured that any moisture in the system will be removed in the process. And always use a regulator with a bottle of nitrogen. The regulator on the left is the most common that is used, but the one on the right that has the little floating ball will allow you to just allow a trickle of nitrogen through the system to blot up any moisture that might be left. So to recap, the triple evacuation method is to be used if you do not have a vacuum pump that is capable of pulling a 500 micron evacuation level, or there is liquid water still in the system. If you do have a vacuum pump that is capable of pulling a 500 micron evacuation, then you can use the deep vacuum method, which pulls down to 500 and holds to see that you have a tight system, and then follow the procedure if you need more evacuation work or if you might possibly have a leak in the system. This is a slide out of a major manufacturer's ductless training program, and they recommend triple evacuation for all ductless product. Please check with your local distributor where you buy your ductless equipment and ask what method of evacuation they require.
Go to arefco.com for more videos, like, subscribe, and check back every week for new videos.